In the mythology of the Second World War, few machines command the fear and awe associated with the Panzer VI Tiger I. It was not merely a tank, it was a 57-ton steel fortress, a physical manifestation of German engineering ambition, armed with a gun that single-handedly redefined tank warfare. The devastating 8.8 Samotitumeters KWK-36. For every Allied tanker facing it, the Tiger was an existential threat. It was a beast capable of obliterating them from 2,000 yards away, a mile, before they had any chance of return fire. This machine was a prestige project, meticulously handcrafted in German factories, demanding the finest materials and the most skilled labor. The production cost, in terms of wartime currency and man-hours, was the equivalent of over $100,000 per unit. This was the ultimate expression of the German military philosophy, the cult of quality, the belief that one superior weapon could defeat 10 lesser ones. Yet the machine that ultimately drove the Tiger to extinction, that won the war on tracks, was built for barely $30,000. It was the M4 Sherman, a tank often ridiculed, nicknamed the Ronson for its early tendency to burn, and frequently outmatched in a one-on-one duel. This is the story of two tanks that define two violently opposed visions of war: the Nazi doctrine of luxury perfection versus the Allied power of brutal, simple quantity. And how, in the end, the Tiger's most deadly enemy wasn't the Sherman's gun. It was its own transmission. The Tiger's genesis was a desperate, immediate response to a battlefield shock. When the Wehrmacht invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, they encountered the T-34 and the KV-1. These tanks, with their sloping armor and powerful guns, were a brutal surprise that the standard German Panzer III and I-4 could not handle. Hitler demanded a new heavy tank, and he demanded it immediately. The result was the Tiger I. Its design was the realization of German engineering prowess. The armor was immense, 100 millimeters thick on the hull front and 80 millimeters on the side superstructure. While the design was boxy and lacked the advanced sloping of the later Panther, its sheer thickness made it impervious to the most common Allied anti-tank guns at typical engagement ranges. The gun was its terror. The 88mm gun was not merely an anti-tank cannon, it was a modified anti-aircraft gun with a remarkably flat trajectory and high muzzle velocity. It guaranteed penetration against virtually every Allied tank it faced. The Tiger was designed to park itself on a hill or in a defensive position and pick off enemy armor before they could even identify its location. It was the sniper of the tank world, built to dominate the vast open plains of the Eastern Front. The Allied shock was absolute. When the Tiger first appeared, American and British tankers had no counter. The psychological effect of knowing that your enemy could vaporize you without risk to themselves was devastating. In a one-on-one engagement, the Tiger was virtually unbeatable. It was a masterpiece, an artifact of military genius. But it was also an engineer's vanity project, built with a reckless disregard for the fundamental economic and logistical reality of a global war. The downfall of the Tiger was not a tactical one. It was a logistical and mechanical catastrophe. The tank was not a field weapon. It was a delicate instrument. The design team, in their pursuit of perfect firepower and protection, ignored the concept of maintenance and reliability. They pushed German wartime technology to its absolute limit, resulting in a machine whose greatest enemy was often itself. The most chronic point of failure was the transmission and the final drive. At 57 tons, the Tiger was over twice as heavy as the early Ps-04 medium tank. The massive weight put unimaginable stress on the complex steering and drivetrain components. These parts were built with the extremely tight tolerances necessary for a high-performance machine, but they were insufficient for the brutal conditions of a muddy battlefield. Historical records indicate that the final drive assemblies were so prone to failure that they would often catastrophically break down after traveling only 100 miles, sometimes even less. This was not a weapon that could be relied upon for a rapid offensive or a swift retreat. A breakdown meant disaster. A broken Tiger was an immobile Tiger. Because of its weight, it was a beast that could not be recovered by standard German tank recovery vehicles. Towing one immobilized Tiger required not one, but three of the immense Sadiq TOIZ. 9. FAMO half-tracks, themselves rare and vital pieces of equipment. The recovery effort tied up massive amounts of manpower and specialized resources. If the Tiger could not be recovered quickly, which was usually the case during a retreat or under enemy fire, the crew was immediately ordered to destroy the tank with explosives to prevent capture. This leads to the starkest statistic. Historical analysis shows that over 50% of all Tiger I tanks were lost due to mechanical breakdown or scuttling by their own crews, not from destruction by enemy fire. The tank was defeated by mud, fuel scarcity, and its own transmission, long before it ever saw a Sherman. Then there was the notorious interleaved roadwheel system. This complex, overlapping arrangement of rubber-tired wheels provided excellent weight distribution and a smooth ride. However, in the muck of the Eastern Front or the frozen earth of a Russian winter, mud and ice would jam between the wheels, freezing them solid. To replace a single inner wheel, a crew often had to remove up to 18 of the outer wheels first, a painstaking, time-consuming operation that could not be performed under combat conditions. Finally, the factor of fuel. The Tiger was an absolute gas guzzler. Its engine was already stressed, but its thirst for fuel meant its operational range was poor, around 60 miles on roads with a full tank. As the war dragged on and Allied bombing systematically destroyed Germany's synthetic fuel production and logistics network, the Tiger often ran out of gas miles from the nearest depot. The greatest tank in the world, stranded and abandoned, defeated not by a shell but by an empty fuel gauge. The M4 Sherman was the antithesis of the Tiger. It was crude, simple, and above all, reliable. It was the ultimate product of American industrial ideology. The entire Sherman design philosophy was dictated by mass production and modularity. It was built not by specialized military manufacturers, but by automotive giants like Ford, Chrysler, and General Motors. They built it the same way they built trucks: fast, simple, and using common, interchangeable parts. The production numbers are staggering and represent the true strategic difference in the war. By the end of the conflict, the United States had produced almost 50,000 Shermans in various configurations. Germany, in the same period, only managed to produce 347 Tiger I tanks. The production ratio was obscene. The US could produce 10 Shermans in the time it took Germany to build one Tiger. The sheer volume of material meant the Allies could afford losses. The Germans could not. The Sherman's greatness was in its logistics. It was light enough, 30 tons, to cross most existing European bridges. It could be rapidly transported by rail without specialized modifications. It was easy to fix, requiring common tools and generic parts, often repaired by non-specialist mechanics in a matter of hours. While early versions earned the derogatory Ronson nickname due to a tendency to explode when hit, a genuine flaw, American pragmatism quickly solved the issue. The later M4 variants introduced wet stowage, a simple yet brilliant modification where the ammunition racks were surrounded by a water and glycol fluid mixture. This drastically reduced the incidence of catastrophic fires, transforming the M4 into one of the most survivable tanks of the war for its crew, even when penetrated. Furthermore, the Sherman was designed around the comfort and efficiency of its 5-man crew. It featured an auxiliary power unit, APU, for quiet battery charging and maintenance, superior ventilation, and, most critically, a hydraulic power traverse for the turret. This last point was a game changer. The Sherman's turret could spin onto a target at high speed, giving the crew a crucial fraction of a second advantage in close-quarters ambush situations, the dominant form of combat in Normandy. The Tiger's traverse was slow and electric, a ponderous movement that often meant the difference between scoring the first hit and being disabled. A tank that could be repaired and put back into action in a day was strategically more valuable than a tank that took a week of specialized labor. The Sherman was the truck that carried the war forward, while the Tiger was perpetually waiting for a spare part. The reality of tank combat in Western Europe rarely resembled the mythical one-on-one duel of popular culture. The average engagement range in Normandy's dense hedgerows and rolling terrain was often less than 600 meters, which nullified the Tiger's supreme long-range advantage. The Allied solution to the Tiger was not to meet its quality with equal quality, but to defeat it with overwhelming numbers and coordinated action. The famous 5 Shermans to 1 Tiger ratio was not a surrender of quality. It was formalized U.S. tactical doctrine. The strategy was simple. The bait. 1 or 2 Shermans would immediately open fire with high-explosive, HE rounds, acting as bait and blinding the Tiger by showering its sensitive optics and gun-mantle it with splinters and dirt. The flank. While the Tiger was occupied with its primary threat, the remaining Shermans would use their superior speed and faster turret traverse to flank the behemoth, firing into the thinner 80mm side or rear armor. The specialized killers. The most reliable tank killer was not the standard Sherman, but its British counterpart, the Sherman Firefly, which mounted the potent 17-pounder anti-tank gun. This gun could penetrate the Tiger's frontal armor, and the Firefly was often held back, waiting for the conventional Shermans to fix the Tiger's position before delivering the killing blow. Even the late-war American 76 Massamatic armed Shermans, while still outgunned, carried high-velocity armor-piercing (HVAP) rounds. Though scarce when used effectively, these rounds could also penetrate the Tiger's front from hundreds of meters, further eroding the German tank's mythical dominance. The Tiger, the technological marvel, lacked the one thing that truly mattered in the field: situational awareness. Its slow turret, poor driver visibility, and reliance on its immense armor often left it surprised and vulnerable in close-quarters ambushes. The Sherman, by contrast, with its excellent crew ergonomics and quick response time, was a far more agile fighter. The battle for Europe was not won by the greatest tank, but by the ability to keep the tanks rolling, to reinforce losses instantly, and to supply the front lines without interruption. This was the war of logistics, and it was a war the United States, through the industrial might symbolized by the M4 Sherman, had won before the first D-Day landing craft even touched the beach. The Tiger I's legendary kill ratio of approximately 5-1 against Allied tanks remains a statistical fact. It was undeniably the most dominant tank on the battlefield. But the ultimate history of the Second World War is not written in tactical victories, it is written in strategic defeat. The $100,000 luxury tank was a crippling drain on the German military-industrial complex. It consumed precious fuel, rare alloys, and highly specialized manpower that the German war machine simply did not possess. It spent more time stranded beside a muddy road than it did hunting on the battlefield. The $30,000 truck on tracks, the humble M4 Sherman, was the true war winner. It won not by being the best tank, but by being the most available and reliable weapon in history. The Tiger was an artifact of genius, a terrifying legend forged in steel. The Sherman was the unglamorous, reliable workhorse that changed history. The conflict between them proves a timeless truth. In any long war of attrition, logistics is greater than firepower, and simple quantity will always conquer fragile, high-maintenance quality. The enemy of perfection is not failure, but simply exhaustion.